The hospital gown was cold. So was the hallway. So was the way the nurse didn't make eye contact when she wheeled me out into the discharge bay. I had blood dried behind my ear, a split lip, and a deep cut across my left shoulder. No broken bones. Just bruises. And quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you ask yourself a question you're too embarrassed to say out loud. Will anyone come? I didn't expect flowers. Or balloons. Or anyone waiting with a car already warmed up. I just asked, one text, to the group chat labeled Fam Bam Red Heart. Need a ride from the ER. I sent a photo too. Nothing dramatic. Just my wristband, the 4 mark, the hospital name in the corner. My sister replied 6 minutes later. We're at bottomless brunch. Order an Uber. With a laughing emoji. As if my pain was punchline material. I read it once.
Twice.
Then replied. Will do. Didn't argue. Didn't guilt. Didn't beg. I slid my phone back into my pocket, nodded at the nurse, and walked outside into the sharp evening air. There was a bench near the exit. I sat there while my Uber app spun in circles. But something in my chest didn't feel right. Not physical.
Not yet.
It was the realization that, even in my worst moment, my family chose brunch. And mimosas. And Instagram photos with captions like, Saturdays are for sisters. 12 hours later, after I'd gone home alone, after the painkillers had worn off, something changed. Inside me.
And around me.
Because at 11:14 p.m., my sister's phone rang. She picked up. Probably still tipsy. Probably still laughing. The voice on the other end wasn't mine. It belonged to a police officer. And his words turned the air in her lungs to cement. Are you listed as the emergency contact for name? She said yes, still half smiling, until he added. He stopped breathing 12 minutes ago. She told me later that she dropped the phone, right there in the booth, between a half-eaten omelet and her second mimosa. The officer had said 12 minutes. She probably spent 10 of those brushing off the ring. Too loud, too busy. Too full of herself to care. The brunch crowd fell silent when she screamed. Not out of guilt. Out of fear. Because for the first time, she realized I could actually disappear. They'd found me at home, collapsed on the bathroom floor. All that just bruises stuff? Turns out, internal bleeding doesn't send a courtesy text. The EMT who showed up said I was minutes from losing consciousness completely. He found the Uber receipt on the kitchen counter, crumpled, unread. A bottle of prescription meds untouched. My name barely whispered when they lifted me onto the gurney. I flatlined once. Came back. Flatlined again. Then I stabilized. The hospital called it lucky. The doctor called it a delay in proper care. I called it something else. A moment I'll never forget, not because I almost died, but because of who didn't show up. When I woke up in ICU, the lights were dim. My sister was there. Mascara smudged. Hoodie borrowed. She sat stiff in the visitor's chair. Why didn't you tell me it was that bad? She whispered. I didn't answer. Not right away. Because here's the truth. I had. Every message, every call, every small sign over the years that said, I need you. She'd laughed off.
Dismissed.
Swatted like a gnat. And now, suddenly, she cared? Because someone in uniform told her I stopped breathing?
No.
That wasn't love. That was consequence. I turned my head toward the window. Spoke without looking at her. You told me to call Uber. Uber doesn't sit at the ICU all night. She flinched. But I didn't. Because something in me had already shifted. I wasn't just her little brother anymore. I was a man who survived being forgotten. And now, I was remembering everything. She tried. Oh, she tried. The next morning she brought coffee. My favorite, or what she thought was. Hazelnut, no sugar. I hadn't touched that order in 3 years. She sat by my bed like we were starring in some sad movie, waiting for forgiveness to roll in with the credits. I didn't say much. Didn't give her what she came for. Because this wasn't about mimosas. It wasn't about brunch. It was about every single moment she taught me, without saying it out loud, that her comfort mattered more than my survival. I didn't think it was serious, she whispered. That's the problem, I said. You never do. Her face crumbled. But I didn't hand her a tissue. I'd stopped cleaning up after her long ago. By the time the rest of the family showed up, late, of course, they brought flowers and stories. We were about to text you. We didn't know how to help. Maybe next time give us more of a heads up.
Next time.
Like grief books appointments. Like near-death sends calendar invites. I nodded politely. Listen, like a man being offered a contract he had no intention of signing. That evening, when they left, I asked the nurse to turn off visitor access. Just for one night. And in the quiet, I wrote one message. Not for them. For the officer who called her. I found his name in the discharge report. Typed slowly, carefully. Then sent. You saved my life. Not because you showed up, but because you saw what no one else did. Thank you. He replied 3 hours later. Simple. No one should ever have to dial out of their own family for help. I read it twice. And felt something loosen in my chest. Because he was right. I shouldn't have had to. But I did. And now that I had, I wasn't going back. I was discharged on a Tuesday. No balloons. No fanfare. Just a wheelchair, a clipboard, and a nurse who smiled like she knew I was walking out of more than just a hospital. My sister offered to drive me home. I said no. Called the same officer who made the call. He picked me up without a second of hesitation. The ride was quiet, comfortable, safe. He didn't ask questions. Just turned the radio down and said, "Let me know if you need anything else." And in that moment I realized he was more of a brother than my actual one ever was. When I got home, I started cleaning. Not the apartment, my life. I left the family group chat. Not with drama. Just a quiet exit. The kind they couldn't argue with because silence doesn't leave fingerprints. I boxed up old birthday cards. Took down framed photos from years that no longer counted. Wiped the digital slate too. Blocked numbers, archived threads, filtered my inbox. And then, I wrote an open letter. Not for revenge. For clarity. I posted it anonymously on a local blog that covered first responder stories. The title read, "The day my emergency contact chose brunch." I didn't name names.
Didn't need to.
I told the story exactly how it happened. The text.
The Uber.
The collapse. The silence. I ended it with this. Sometimes, it takes almost dying to finally choose who's allowed to stand beside your life. And sometimes, the person who saves you isn't the one you grew up with, it's the one who shows up when everyone else is sipping champagne. It went viral by morning. The comments section flooded. Messages like, "Same. This broke me. You are not alone." And I believed them. For the first time, I truly did. I didn't answer her calls. Not the missed one at 7:12 a.m. Not the follow-up text at 7:13. "Did you write that?" Not the voicemail she left crying at 7:18. Because I had nothing left to explain. She had stepped over my pain. Sipped around it. Dismissed it with a joke. And now that the world had seen her reflection in the mirror I held up, she didn't like the angle. The article spread. Friends shared it. Colleagues whispered about it. Even our pastor forwarded it to the church group chat with a quiet, haunting caption. "May we all show up before it's too late." My mom called too. I didn't pick up. Because the last time she spoke to me, it was to say, "Why didn't you plan better?" As if survival was a schedule I failed to follow. My inbox started filling with stories from strangers. Nurses. EMTs. Even a woman who lost her brother at brunch, too. I read every word. Because they weren't just stories. They were stitches. And I was still bleeding. That night, I got a knock at my door. Not loud. Just firm. I opened it to find my sister. No makeup. Red eyes. Holding a card in one hand and my favorite sandwich in the other, the one she never got right. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You already said it," I replied. "At brunch." She stood there like she wanted to fall apart. But I didn't catch her. I'd done that too many times before. I took the sandwich, closed the door, and left the card on the welcome mat. Inside, I sat alone. But not lonely. Because for the first time, I knew exactly who I was. And exactly who I no longer needed to be. She posted a statement. 3 paragraphs. Black text on a white background. No emojis. No filters. It read like a confession wrapped in PR. I failed my brother when he needed me. I chose comfort over compassion, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. She didn't tag me, but she didn't need to. The internet connected the dots. People reshared the blog post with her apology. Some forgave her. Others didn't. I didn't care either way, because the story was no longer about her. It was about me, surviving what I wasn't supposed to survive, standing where no one thought I would. I didn't reply, didn't call, didn't validate her redemption arc. Instead, I made a quiet decision. I updated my emergency contact. Not to her. Not to anyone in my family. To Officer Harris. The man who saw a stranger and acted like family. I texted him. Hope it's okay. I listed you. He replied instantly. Of course. I've got your 6. That was it. No drama. No guilt. Just something I'd never had from my actual bloodline: consistency. Later that week, I got an invite to a family healing dinner. My sister wanted to host. Said it was time to talk things through. I RSVP'd no. Didn't even hesitate. Because you don't heal by sitting in the same room that broke you. You heal by building your own. And I was doing exactly that. One boundary at a time. I was invited to speak. A community panel, small, local, for survivors of medical neglect and family estrangement. The organizer had read the blog post. Said it struck a nerve. Said people needed to hear the rest. I almost said no. Then I remembered the silence in the ER. The buzz of my unanswered phone. The sound of my own breath slipping away. I said yes. The room wasn't packed, but it was full of something better.
Truth. People who didn't pretend.
People who'd been hurt and healed anyway. I took the mic. Hands steady. Voice clear. I didn't name my sister. Didn't list every betrayal. I didn't need to. Instead, I said, family is not who shares your blood. Family is who waits outside your ICU room when no one else comes. Family answers when pain calls, not when the news does. They listened. Some cried. One woman came up to me after and said, "Thank you for saying what we've all felt, but we're too scared to admit." That night, my sister texted again. Just 4 words. "You embarrass me publicly." I stared at it for a second, then replied, "You ignored me privately." No more messages followed. And I didn't need them to, because this wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity,
Peace.
and finally learning to choose myself unapologetically. Months passed. No drama. No apologies. Just distance, the kind that finally feels like peace. I moved cities. Took a job at a local nonprofit, the same one that hosted the panel. I helped others navigate what I had barely survived. Being abandoned while still breathing. I never told anyone in my family I was leaving. No forwarding address. No final text. Because sometimes healing isn't a conversation, it's a quiet exit. One evening, the news ran a feature. A short segment about the growing role of bystanders in emergency response. They featured a few cases. One of them was mine. They replayed the original call, my sister's laugh. The officer's voice breaking as he said, "He stopped breathing 12 minutes ago." I sat alone in my apartment as it aired. No tears. No rage. Just the soft realization. They'd heard it now too. Every person who once shrugged me off. My story wasn't hidden anymore. And neither was their silence. 2 days later, I received a letter. No return address. Just 5 words on the first page. I finally understand. I'm sorry. No name. But I recognized the handwriting. I folded the paper. Didn't tear it. Didn't respond. Because I didn't need an apology. I needed a life. And I'd finally started living one, without depending on people who only show up when it's too late. I sat back in my chair, stared at the skyline outside, and whispered to myself, not in bitterness, but in calm. They lost me the moment I needed them most. And I smiled, because I was no longer asking for rides. I was driving my own story now. Some losses aren't loud. They don't come with screaming matches or slammed doors. Sometimes, it's just a single unanswered message. And a silence that cuts deeper than betrayal ever could. She laughed while I bled. They brunched while I begged. And yet, I didn't choose revenge. I chose to heal quietly, deliberately, fully. Because family isn't who shares your last name. It's who holds your hand when you're too weak to lift your own. And the day I nearly died, I learned who that was. And who it wasn't. So, here's the question that lingers. When someone calls you in pain, do you answer? Or do you leave them wondering if they ever mattered at all? I don't hate them. But I no longer hope they'll change. Because I changed. And that was enough. Get out of this house. Take your curse with you, she spat, her bony fingers wrapped around the edge of the sofa like it owed her something. It was the morning after my husband's funeral. My black dress was still damp from the rain. The casseroles from last night's pity parade sat untouched. And there she was, my mother-in-law, barking orders at 2 hired movers and a cousin I barely knew, dragging out chairs, yanking down curtains, even tossing my wedding portrait face down on the floor. This property reverts to blood family now. Pack your bags, she announced, smug as royalty. I stood in the hallway, shoes soaked, heart hollow. She strutted through the home I built, tearing pieces of me from every room like I never existed. I watched as they carried out the rug I picked, the pillows I stitched, the bookshelf I built for his law books.
No one spoke to me.
Not once. Until she reached for the spare keys. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't cry. Didn't move. I just said, "You forgot one crucial thing." She froze. "My name is Betrayal Monroe. I'm 31. And if you think you know how this ends, stay tuned." What happens when a grieving widow stops mourning and starts remembering what the will really said? They buried him yesterday. But today, they're about to dig up the one truth they thought was buried with him. She laughed. That brittle, arrogant kind of laugh people do when they think you're bluffing. As if grief made me powerless. "You poor thing," she smirked, tossing the house keys into her purse. "He didn't leave you anything but his name. And even that won't help you now." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Because 3 weeks ago, in a quiet hospital room with the machine still humming, my husband handed me a red leather folder. Inside, a final letter. His last act of love. "If anything happens to me, don't trust my mother. Don't trust her smile. Don't trust her tears. And for God's sake, read the envelope taped under the kitchen drawer." That drawer. The one she was standing near now. I turned, walked past her, and pulled it open. Reached underneath. Taped securely. A sealed legal envelope. Labeled in his handwriting. "To my wife, final instructions." I opened it. Took out the notarized copy of his amended will. And read aloud. "I, Michael James Monroe, leave full ownership of our home, assets, and personal property to my wife, Betrayal Monroe. No other party shall claim rights, regardless of bloodline." Her face paled like cold ashes. The cousin holding my dishes froze mid-step. I looked at them, every single one of them, and said, "You're trespassing."
Silence.
Tight, acidic silence. Then I calmly picked up my phone and dialed.
"Hi, yes.
"I need officers dispatched to remove intruders from my property." Now that got her attention. She thought I'd cry. But widows don't always break. Sometimes they bite. She tried to recover, stumbling over her words. That can't be real. Michael would never." "He did." I cut in. "And you know it." I held the document with steady hands.
Signed.
Notarized. Dated just 3 days before his final hospital stay. She reached for it. I stepped back. "You touch this, and I'll add attempted interference with legal property to the trespassing report." Her lips tightened. The mover slowly backed toward the door, unsure whose side they were on anymore. I could hear the sirens in the distance.
Fast. Loud.
Real. She turned to me one last time, eyes burning. "You manipulated him. You turned him against his own family." I looked her dead in the eye.
No.
"You did that when you called me a phase." When you refused to come to our wedding. When you told him marrying me meant losing a mother. I walked to the front door. Held it open. For her. I buried a man I loved yesterday. I won't bury myself today. The police arrived moments later. I handed them the paperwork. They did the rest. She left without another word. But her silence screamed. I watched from the window as the last truck rolled away. My things still packed inside. They'd taken my belongings, but left something behind. Proof that I had more than grief. I had ground to stand on. And I wasn't leaving it. Not for anyone. The house was quiet again. Still full of pain. But also finally mine. And I wasn't done. Because buried deeper than the will was something she never saw coming. I spent the night in the guest room. The master bedroom still smelled like him. Cedar and cinnamon. Too heavy to breathe in. At 2:14 a.m., I opened the attic door. Michael's old safe sat in the corner, dusty, untouched. I remembered the code. Our anniversary. And his baseball jersey number.
Click.
It opened. Inside. A folder labeled Confidential, for Betrayal only. And beneath it a small velvet box. My hands shook, but I kept going. Inside the folder were documents I didn't know existed. Real estate deeds. Old letters. And a quiet bomb. A property transfer agreement. Michael had purchased a lakefront cabin. In my name. Sole beneficiary. No mention of his family. The purchase date? 2 months before his final surgery. He knew. He knew they'd come for blood. And he wanted to give me roots. Someplace no one could touch.
Tears fell.
But not just from pain. This was love. The kind that plans for your survival, even when it won't be there to witness it. And then I opened the velvet box. A necklace. Delicate. Gold. With a tiny charm shaped like a key. Underneath it, a note in his handwriting. For your next chapter. No one can lock you out now.
I didn't sleep that night.
I packed instead. Not to leave in defeat, but to relocate in victory.
They thought they'd evicted me.
But all they did was clear the stage. Now I had a cabin.
A key.
And a storm in my lungs. It was time to rebuild. On my terms. The lake house was quieter than I remembered. We'd only been there once, last fall. A short weekend away. No cell service. Just trees, wind, and the sound of Michael reading aloud on the porch. I unlocked the door with the charm from the necklace. It fit perfectly. Inside, everything was exactly how we left it. His flannel draped over the armchair. The 2 coffee mugs still drying near the sink. The stack of books he never finished. I stood in the center of the living room, letting it wash over me. Grief, yes. But also ownership. Not just of a property. Of a life. Of a version of myself that had always been made to feel temporary. Until now. I spent the next few days cleaning, restoring, reimagining. Then I made the final move. I called Michael's lawyer and requested a legal notice to be drafted. To her. His mother. It was short. Cold. Precise. As the lawful widow and sole beneficiary of the Monroe estate, I hereby inform you that any further harassment, contact, or legal interference will be met with court action. This is your only warning. No emotion. No rage. Just boundaries, the kind she never thought I'd have the power to draw. I mailed it certified. Tracked the delivery.
Signed.
Received. No reply. No lawsuit. No more surprise visits. Just silence. Delicious, well-earned silence. And still I wasn't done. I opened a folder on my laptop labeled The Monroe Files, because while she was busy erasing me, Michael had been quietly documenting everything about her. It was time to make sure the world saw her the way he did. Michael kept everything. Emails, voicemails, copies of bank transfers. He created a digital paper trail so meticulous, it looked like an attorney's prep file for court. At first, I didn't understand why. Why he documented conversations, saved screenshots, even kept audio files labeled with dates and times. But then I saw the folder titled, For Her Protection. Inside were recordings of her, screaming, threatening, manipulating. One clip from 2 years ago. If you marry her, I'll cut you off. Don't test me, Michael. You'll regret tying yourself to that leech. She'll drain you dry. Another from just 6 months before he died. I'm not saying Brielle's a gold digger, but don't be shocked when she sells the house the moment you flatline. He never told me. Never let it stain our days. But he knew. He knew she'd come for me the second he was gone. And so he did what good men do. He built a fortress out of truth. He left me armor-stitched from evidence. I gathered it all, made backups, printed transcripts, and assembled a private dossier titled, When They Try Again. Because I knew her. She didn't lose. She waited. And the moment she sensed silence, she'd strike again. But this time, I wouldn't need to fight. I'd just press play. I didn't want revenge. I wanted her to stop rewriting history. And if she wouldn't do that willingly, I had the soundtrack to her downfall ready. She made her next move exactly 30 days later. An envelope arrived at the lake house. No return address. No stamp. Hand-delivered. Inside, a letterhead from her lawyer. Or rather, the one who still tolerated her. Our client, Diane Monroe, asserts that emotional distress, displacement, and lack of access to her deceased son's home warrants partial restitution of property or financial compensation. Should this not be settled amicably, legal proceedings will follow. No signature from her. Just a threat in cursive ink. I didn't flinch. I emailed my lawyer everything. Michael's recordings. The will. The timeline. My attorney replied the next day. We'll respond formally. She doesn't have a case, but she might have an audience. Be ready for gossip. He was right. 3 days later, a cousin posted vague family drama on Facebook. She got everything. Some people forget who raised their husbands. Another commented, she always gave off snake energy. No one tagged me, but it was clear. She was trying to smear me, to make me look like the cold widow who hoarded wealth and locked out family. What she didn't know, I had been preparing my response. Not in court, not on social media, but in a single, private group email. I hit send. Subject, in defense of silence. Dear family, I never wanted a war, but I won't be buried quietly in someone else's story. Attached are documents, recordings, and the truth. Read it, or don't, but I won't explain myself again. No more secrets. No more staged martyrdom. I gave them the real script. Now it was their choice whether to keep clapping for a lie or sit with the truth. I never got a reply to that email, but I saw the ripple. The cousin's vague Facebook posts vanished. The whispers stopped. And Diane? She never filed that lawsuit. Silence can be louder than any fight when it's backed by truth. Weeks passed. I settled into the lake house, painted the porch, and planted lavender near the mailbox. Each small act was a declaration. I stayed. You didn't break me. One morning, a letter arrived. No lawyer this time. Just her handwriting. I didn't know he did all that. I didn't realize how much he gave you. You win, Brielle. But remember, you were never one of us. I smiled. Because she was right. I was never one of them. Not by their rules. Not by their cruelty. But I was everything Michael chose. The home. The life. The legacy. And they couldn't touch that anymore. Later that afternoon, I framed the deed to the lake house. Hung it by the door. Next to it, I placed the photo of us on the porch that first weekend. His arm around me, eyes squinting into the sun. I whispered, "You did good, love. I'm safe." And I meant it. Because revenge didn't come with screaming matches or slammed doors. It came with peace, with roots, with a key they could never duplicate. I didn't just survive her. I outlived the version of me she thought she could erase. And now, every breath here is mine. On land she'll never walk again.